Okay, anyhow, I'd like to welcome Jim Skinner here to talk to us today with the ACSM Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine and Exercise Science video series. We've done almost 40 of these, Jim.
Really?
So it's about time that we get you in here to chat about the past. And so I just wondered if you would start a little bit with what you're doing now with yourself, and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about your preparation.
Okay. Well, I'm doing now what I've sort of always done, and that is I get involved with a lot of different things and a lot of different disciplines. And so at the moment, I'm still doing a lot of lecturing, not a lot, but lecturing and some consulting with a couple of companies and doing some travel and doing a little bit of writing and that sort of thing. I'm
Fun
retired.
stuff.
Well, writing is not always fun,
that.
you know that. What was it Churchill had said? That you start out a book, it's your mistress and becomes your master.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, where did you retire from? Indiana? Or?
I was at Indiana, but I was actually living in Arizona, working because I had grants. I was writing papers, so I could do that anywhere. Okay. And now I'm in the mountains of western North Carolina, living on a lake and enjoying my life, and still travel and still do things, you know, that sort of thing. Okay. And like I said, I've always been involved with other kinds of disciplines. So I'm working with an engineer on in this one company I'm consulting with, and that sort of thing. So
I think that would be. Now you can sort of call your own shots.
Oh, too. Yeah. I can do what I want to, because if
you want to.
Exactly. If it's not interesting to me for some reason or other,
I'm not going to do it.
I'm not going to do it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to your high school days and college days. Were you an athlete? Did you play?
I was a swimmer. I was the number one. I had first place for 3 years in Chicago swimming.
Oh, wow.
I was a city champion.
So you were right in Chicago growing up?
No, I grew up in Mississippi and Alabama. And when I moved to Chicago, that was my first foreign language. I had to speak with Yankees.
And what grade were you in?
I started high school for the freshman year in high school.
That was a switch.
Oh, you have to realize 1950, coming from Mississippi, segregated school,
different world
to
Chicago.
You know, in my homeroom, there's a black fella sitting in front of me, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? Fortunately for me, he was a real nice fella, and he was smart and a good athlete, and all these stereotypes that I had didn't make any sense. So I got to know him fairly well.
That's neat. So you were a swimmer?
I was a swimmer primarily in water polo.
That's a tough sport.
Yeah. Well, that's how we didn't have enough time to swim for training, so we would swim in the evening and playing water polo. Yeah. That's how I got my training. More than we just didn't have that many days, and we didn't know what all we were supposed to do back in those days.
Sure.
And then I went down to the University of Illinois and was on the swimming team for a couple of years there, but not really. I wasn't that good. You know, I was good in a little pond, but not the big pond with the big boys. And
did you major in physical education then?
I started out in pre-med. And
this is in Champaign, Urbana?
University of Illinois. Yeah. I started out in pre-med, pre-dentistry. I wasn't sure which. And then at the end of the first year, I never had to study in high school, so I just didn't study. And I got into a fraternity, and there was all the other things going on. And so I got, you know, good average grades, but not enough to stay in. So then I switched over, because I loved the physiology and anatomy and all that, so I got into physical education because I was thinking of coaching. And more and more I got into the physiology and the exercise physiology, then I loved it more and more. So I eventually went on and stayed in the master's program, and then my Ph.D. I was going to leave, but you know, in 1954, 58, there were not many. There were about 4 or 5 universities that were fairly good in what I wanted to do, and Curitin, who was my advisor, said, "Why don't you stay here?" And I wound up staying there, and so the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I know that Curitin started that. I think what do you call it? The fitness lab.
Physical Fitness Research Laboratory. Yeah.
So he was well established by the time you're there.
And one thing about Curitin is that he knew intuitively what was right, but he did not have the right answer. So the students, we had good students. You know, Bill Haskell.
I want you to just go ahead. Tell me about the students that
Well,
you were there with.
so what we
what
would,
a group.
Yeah, what we would do is we would leave and we would talk amongst ourselves that we think he's right that this is going to happen if you exercise, but we don't think that's the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would sit and talk about it. So Bill Haskell was there, Mike Pollock was there, Paul Ribisel, a whole bunch of people that, you know, since that time in that group, there were 3 of us became presidents of ACSM.
I thought so, at least, yeah.
Yeah.
And you did your master's there, too.
Yeah, I did my master's
So you were
there,
there,
too.
what, 5, 6 years?
Oh, more than that.
More?
Yeah.
Well, no, you did your undergrad.
I did my undergrad,
Yeah.
too, so it was 54 to 63.
Yeah.
Because I went away for a little while. I went back just for a semester. I dropped out to do some other things. And then I started working for the Public Health Service with an exercise and heart disease. And then I got to know a whole bunch of people. And I came out here in Seattle for 1 year at the university with Bob Bruce.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I was in the division of cardiology, and I was
Is
doing
that
research.
right?
I was one of the first to do research on peripheral vascular disease.
And when was that, Jim?
1966.
Is that? I didn't know you were working with Bruce.
65
He
that
was
was.
pretty much ahead of his time.
Yeah.
So.
And then there was a surgeon, vascular surgeon named Gene Strandness, who was one of the top people, and he had done some exercise testing with these people, and I came to him and I said, "You're not doing your testing right." And so we got going back and forth, and we did a couple of studies, and a couple of the few of the early studies about exercise and peripheral vascular disease. And so when one of my graduate students eventually came back and started, I got in a situation where I couldn't do a lot of these things.
Yeah.
I did a couple of little studies, but then I sort of helped him get going, and now he's considered one of the authorities in peripheral vascular disease because he sort of continued what I had done. You know, so you reach a point where you can't do everything. As long as it gets done, I don't care who does it, as long as I learn what happened.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, you get the answer.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Well, now so you were out here for a year, and then so there was there a.
I was 2 years in Washington D.C., out here 1 year.
And then where?
Then Penn State. I was still with the Public Health Service, commissioned officer, and they were doing a project there. So I was with Buskirk. But see, when we start talking about exercise and heart disease, there was a committee. Here I was, fresh out of my Ph.D., working with Sam Fox, who was a real big person at that time. And so on the committee were people like Montoy and Bruce and Henry Taylor and Bruno Balke and all of these people. And here I was just a young guy. So I was sort of the secretary of the group, you know, and I was the gopher. But I got to know all of them.
What a group! Yeah.
And so then when things happened, I went to start working with Buskirk. And then I stayed on there for 4 years, and we did a big project in getting funding from the Public Health Service on that particular project. Wow. So I got involved early, and when I started working with Sam Fox, and we did a literature review on physical activity and cardiovascular health, and it was one of the first to kind of bring everything together. And that was, we were invited to put that into the American Journal of Cardiology. And it also, I had sent in the 3 papers from my doctoral dissertation. So the first 4 papers of the issue
were all yours?
Were all mine. I mean, I was first author on 2 and second author on 2.
And what year was that?
1965. 65, February of 65.
In American Journal of Cardiology?
Yeah.
Wow.
So my friends say, "Well, I read your journal," you know. So I was very lucky. I came in at the right time.
Yeah.
And the other person I worked with was John Halassi. He was assigned by the Public Health Service to come and do some things, and some of the things he thought he could do, he couldn't. So he and I did a couple of studies together, and he got involved with exercise when he was there. Now, it wasn't because of me, but while he was there. But I've known John Halassi for a long time, and then he went back to Washington University, and he became one of the first ones doing exercise at the cellular level. And so that was that connection there too.
Now, how do you get involved in the U.S. Public Health Service? Because it's sort of like a military appointment, right?
Yeah, it's the medical branch of the Coast Guard.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was a health commission officer. I was the equivalent of a lieutenant commander. I never had a uniform, but you know, I worked there for 2 years, and then I did 1 year here in Seattle, and then 1 year back there. So I did 4 years of military service.
So. And which of that group got you involved with the American College of Sports Medicine? There are a lot of candidates you named there, but was there one?
I went to the first meeting in 1960 in Atlantic City, and then 64 was my first meeting, and I've only missed one meeting since that time, because that's when I was in Germany for a year and I couldn't afford to come back, and it was in Toronto. So I've been, since 64 to 2009. That's a few years.
Do the math.
A few years. So that's 45 years. I missed one meeting. So
now, when you were at Illinois doing your doctorate, that must have been around when was that?
That was
late 50s?
Well, 58 to 60 was
Okay,
no, 60 was when I started it, and then
okay.
63 is when I graduated.
Okay. So the college had been formed.
Oh, the college had been formed.
So did you hear about it through TK? Or
yeah, I would travel with him occasionally, and then we were doing something, and I helped him out, and it was at the same place nearby where the first meeting was in Atlantic City. So I went with him. So I knew about it, and then I became a member in '64, and then I got in early. My number's 571. We got over 20,000 students, and the numbers I think go up to over 30,000.
Yeah.
So I was one of the first
Yeah.
600. Yeah.
Now, were you involved with that, or with the early guidelines
Yes.
team?
I got it. I was involved with writing the first set of
That's what I
guidelines.
thought.
I was involved with that. I got interested and involved with the international relations because my language ability, and also because I traveled a fair amount even then, and so Skip Canoe, Alan Ryan was the chair of that committee, and that was mainly because the physician in sports medicine paid his way. We didn't have money to pay him to go to the other meetings. Yeah. And then when he stepped down, Skip took over, and he had it for about 10 or 12 years.
International relations.
And then I had it for 12 years.
Yeah.
And then at that point, Oded Baor took over, but I was the chair of the organizing committee for the World Congress, the FIMS World Congress, which was held in Orlando. And so that was another 4 years, 3-4 years with the international relations. So.
Now, did you go to? Now, weren't you also involved with the early the fitness certification?
Oh yeah,
and all
the
that,
certification
Jim?
yeah. I was in the first group along with Mike Pollock and some of the others, and we went out to Aspen.
Yes.
And at that time, some of the people in the board were complaining that we were going there to ski.
Right, and this was Balky's thing.
Yeah. But we were going there to ski, but we were paying our own way.
Yeah.
And so we would work in the morning and then go ski and then come back and work in the afternoon and go out to dinner. And so we did that, and then eventually they paid some of our expenses, but they didn't pay everything. And then eventually we got the first guidelines out, set of guidelines out.
Yeah, it evolved out of that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then now it's just evolved over a number of times.
And I think it's the 8th edition or something like that.
I was involved with the first 3 editions, and then so I've been involved with that, with the certification and with the international relations a lot. Yeah. And then I was president in '79.
Right. And what was going on then, Jim? I mean, what were there any hot issues, or now you were we had moved to Indianapolis by then, or no? Or still in Wisconsin?
No, that was afterwards, because I was involved with the group that was looking for places to stay. We were looking at a number of different cities.
Dave Lamb was on that committee.
Yeah, Dave Lamb and Henry Miller and Tipton and some others.
Yeah, because you guys went around.
Yeah,
Kansas City was
Kansas
one
City,
of them.
Denver.
Yeah.
We went to a lot of different places, and then when we finally we got to the point where it was going to be Indianapolis, I was the chair of the fundraising committee for the National Center, and so we were able to get money from Gatorade and from the Eli Lilly and that sort of thing, and we moved in not owing a heck of a lot of money, so we were very lucky.
I'm trying to think who was the executive vice president.
Tom Miller.
That's right.
Tom Miller was.
And he was in Wisconsin and made
the move down, and then he stayed a certain number of years, and he said, I think every 5 or 6 years you should get new blood, and so he decided he wanted to move on, and we didn't. I personally thought he was one of the best we've ever had. I got along with him very well, and then he went on, and then we got a few, there've been a few other people since that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, looking back, you would probably agree the move to Indianapolis was a pretty neat move.
It was.
I mean,
we raised $250,000. We got $250,000 from Eli Lilly. We thought that was fantastic. And we found out that was less than 1/10 of 1% of its budget that he had to spend every year to be a nonprofit organization.
wow.
So, and then of course Indianapolis gave us the land. So, with these sorts of things, then we just had to raise the money for the actual building.
I remember reading about Mayor Hudnut, and so you probably had some meetings. It sounded like they were very welcoming.
They were. They really were. They wanted us, they were thinking at that time NCAA was going to be there and the AAU and all this. Let's get all the sports groups, sports groups there.
And NCAA did end up coming there eventually.
But Kansas City was a viable, but there were two factions. And so we were sort of told, we'll give you land here, but if you go there, we won't give you any money. And this one says, we'll give you land here, but if you go there, we won't give you any money. So we're in the middle of a political struggle. So then,
turns out that it's a beautiful location, in Indianapolis. And
well, but we were the first one on that end of the canal.
Yeah.
And so we were sort of the cornerstone of the new development for Indianapolis. And so that's why they were willing to give us the land and everything else. Then there was that old house in there, and we had to get it off.
That.
And that took a lot of time. And they had to buy it and move it as a historical, and move it to another place. And then we had the land. So.
Yeah. So what was the situation when you were president, Jim, of the clinician element? Had they gotten much involved? Or was that a
we've
point
always
when
had
you were trying to get more. I forget sort of. When,
we've always been trying to get more clinicians. We've always had a certain number, because remember it started out there were more clinicians in it, because the American model was clinicians and the scientists, and it started out with more clinicians and fewer scientists, and then gradually started shifting. As opposed to the European model where it's only physicians. And so we always had that question of 30, 35, 40% clinicians, and then it became more the clinical side rather than just physicians, because we started getting some nurses, some therapists and that sort of thing, and it just keeps evolving. And then what always happens, you get some organizations say, well, we really are interested more in orthopedics, and they get their own little splinter organization, so you lose some of that, because people can only go to so many meetings. And well, to me, what was always the best thing about the American College of Sports Medicine was the variety and the diversity, because you go to a group of orthopedic surgeons or attorneys or whatever, and they'll say, I'm a better attorney than he is, I'm a better surgeon than he is. It's a competition. But here, you got a person saying, well, I'm a damn good orthopedic surgeon, but I don't really know enough about physiology. And the physiologists say, well, I'm a good physiologist, but I don't know anything about biomechanics, or not, I want to learn. And so that's what you do. You start working with other people, and that's what I've always loved, is learning how other things can affect it. And I remember a couple of years we did a symposium where we would say, take a topic like dance, and we would have a biomechanics person come and talk about the biomechanical problems, a nutritionist about their problems, a surgeon, physiologist, and we get 4, 5, 6 people from different disciplines talking about dance and how sports medicine and sports science can relate to that. And I always found that to be some of the most interesting
That's a very good
symposia.
Idea. Yeah, that'd be nice to have that again, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a common focus in physical activity, any way you want to cut it.
Exactly.
And that's the draw.
Yeah. But you can understand if, the people would say, I'm interested in biochemistry, and they want to get there and really talk amongst themselves. The problem with that is that sometimes, not always, and I'm not just picking out biochemistry, it's any of the areas, they start talking amongst themselves, and some of the students don't really understand enough, and so they're not following it. Whereas if you have a sort of a general thing, they know that there are people in the audience who don't know about the biomechanics or the physiology or something. So you don't dumb it down, but you make it so like a Scientific American article that an intelligent person can follow. And that's what we, when I was chair of the program committee, that's what I always said, make it, an intelligent person can understand it, but not necessarily a specialist. And to me, that was it.
And again, I think that's what makes what goes on here more applicable, because you're getting to an audience then.
Oh, yeah.
You're not just talking to each other.
Exactly.
And then you can do something with it.
Yeah. Now you can still have some of those, and you go to your, and you have your 100 people who want to really get into something. Then that's fine.
Yeah. I think everybody I've talked to over the years has sort of all agreed that that's the beauty of of ACSM is the interdisciplinary nature and
exactly
how much they learn from other people.
That's always been what I love about it more than anything else.
Yeah.
Other than the people. I mean, the people are in this organization. I've found over the years, when I introduced them to my wife, I remember my ex-wife, I used to say, "Now this guy's coming. He's a character."
Right.
And afterwards, I'd be talking. I said, "Remember him?" She said, "No." I said, "The character." She said, "They're all characters. Tell me more about him so I can understand who you're talking about."
Narrow it down.
Narrow it down somehow, And so, but they're genuinely friendly and helpful and that sort of thing. And I've developed some beautiful relationships.
Oh yeah, it is a good, very personable group.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that goes back to what you just said a while ago, is that you don't feel like you're competing with anyone.
Right. Exactly.
You're all sort of in it for a good reason. And so you don't have that.
With the exception of a couple of years, there's almost never been much politics. When Tom Miller, had done some work with the American Heart Association. They had little cliques. So when his very first meeting with the board, he's watching and he's sort of drawing a diagram, and he said, "Here's a topic that the people are discussing, and there are 4 or 5 people over here and 4 or 5 people over there." So he started writing down these 4 names over here and these 4 names over there. Another topic come up, and they're switching, and people and new people, And he said after about 5 issues, he never found a clique that everyone followed this kind of thing or that thing. They were all arguing from the standpoint of the college, what they think is best.
What's best
for the college. And so he never found this political. And we've had a couple of times where the politics have sort of raised his head. But for the most part, it's been, let's do what's best for the organization.
Yeah. And I think Jim Whitehead has done a good job pulling all that and keeping things sort of under control, which is probably a hard thing to do.
The college has grown tremendously over the last, since it started. So I mean, what's this 56th meeting, and in that time, the changes I've seen in the last 45.
Pretty amazing.
Lots of big changes.
Well, anyhow, I told you 30 minutes would go real fast.
Yeah, it did it?
Yeah. So, thanks, Jim.
Okay, my pleasure
for talking.
Yeah.